4 direkt gegenüber.
After getting 2 planes, one of which was delayed, and getting on the wrong train and immediately having to say "Sprechen Sie English" in a panic to one of the German train conductors, I made it to my hostel, which was a relief, particularly after having a sweaty, horrendous walk from the train station, carrying my back-breaking backpack that I immediately regretted packing so full. The Space Night Hotel was a capsule hostel designed like a space station. It felt very much like a hostel designed for introverted nerds, so I was very content here. After checking in, I took myself out and got some vegan currywurst and a pretzel and some German beer. Once I'd had my dinner, I took myself to the German Spy Museum, which was quite busy and a little bit touristy. I enjoyed it, though I was tired after a long travel day. I walked back to the hostel and spotted the Berlin Mall on the way. When I got back to the hostel, I used the bathroom for the first time, and I was met with an unwanted surprise, and this was the beginning of my realisation that hostels are really not for me. On my first full day in Berlin, I went to the Berlin Story Museum, which is a bunker. I spent 3.5 hours in there. I couldn't believe how long I spent there. I ended up missing some of the other things I had planned to do. The museum traces the history of Hitler from his childhood to his political life to World War II. It even showed the exact place where he took his own life. The museum displayed some really harrowing images that have really stayed with me. I felt quite emotional at the museum. It's probably one of the most impactful museums I've been to. Following a quick cheap lunch stop at Lidl, I took myself to the Berlin Cathedral. I didn't really have any expectations of what the cathedral would be like, so when I saw the sheer size of it, I was totally in shock. When I entered the cathedral, I was even more in awe, as it was absolutely stunning. I enjoyed just sitting there and being at peace, and eventually I took myself up the hundreds of steps to the top of the cathedral. When I was halfway up the steps, I had a sudden realisation that I was going to have to climb all the way down again. But I quickly forgot about this when I got to the top and I saw the amazing views of the city. It was beautiful. That evening, I went out for dinner and I had the best apple strudel that I have ever had and some more German beer. I found eating out in Berlin to be really easy. I'd done a little bit of research beforehand and learnt a little bit about the etiquette, which was quite helpful. I ended the night by going to the Blue Man Group show. It's probably one of the weirdest shows I've ever been to. In fact, I have absolutely no idea how to describe it. It was weird, a little bit silly, but I really enjoyed it. After passing Checkpoint Charlie, which was the crossing point between East and West Berlin during the Cold War, I went to the Jewish History Museum. One of the rooms in the museum is called the Holocaust Tower. It is an isolated, empty room with very little light coming from the top of it, and you hear echoes of the outside world coming in. The Garden of Exile is another part of the museum which consists of concrete blocks that are quite disorientating to walk through. The majority of the concrete blocks are filled with soil from Berlin, and one was filled with soil from Jerusalem. On top of the concrete blocks are olive bushes that represent hope. One of my favourite parts of the museum was an installation consisting of hundreds of metal faces that were cut out to represent the lives that were lost in the Holocaust. They were covering the entire floor and you could even walk on them. After I finished going around the museum, I went to the cafe in the museum where I was able to enjoy a kosher lunch. Following the Jewish Museum, I went to the Berlin Gallery of Modern Art. I absolutely loved this art gallery. I was totally blown away and really loved all of the art on show. I just felt like everything that I saw was really my kind of thing. It was so colourful and there were so many different styles, and I just really got a lot out of it. I felt a huge desire to create, and I loved that feeling. I loved that feeling of being inspired and that feeling of engaging in something that I actively really enjoy. I loved it. After visiting the gallery, I was pretty hungry. I came across an Italian restaurant and I quickly regretted going there as I sat outside, but it was on a really busy road and it was really hot and I felt like I couldn't breathe because of all the fumes from the cars and motorbikes passing by. There was also a lot of roadworks in the area. The meal itself was pretty mediocre, but I was happy enough with it, and the owner was also really nice, and I was even able to use a little bit of German with him. For my last night in Berlin, I went to Cabaret Berlin the Musical. It ended up being a play entirely in German, which isn't what I expected. It also took place inside a tent, which was unbearably hot. I sat next to a really nice German family who translated a little bit for me, but I ended up leaving in the interval, mainly because I was absolutely exhausted and it was quite late. I also didn't really have a clue what was going on in the play, but I still kind of enjoyed it. And that's my postcard from Berlin. I really enjoyed Berlin. It felt like the kind of place that there's plenty to do. So many museums, so many art galleries and things to do. So I feel like if I was ever to return, there's plenty more that it has to offer.